Hello and welcome to the D3 Energy live stream. I am Greg Davis, founder of D3 Energy, and welcome back. And this is where you can come and learn about the oil and gas exploration and production business, and in particular about the resurgence of conventional oil and gas into the mix of oil and gas exploration and production in the United States. And one of the things I wanted to touch on today was, how is oil and gas found? The old adage is, oil and gas is found in the minds of men and women. Oil and gas is found in the minds of men and women, because we cannot find oil and gas unless we have the creative, technical, very wise minds of petroleum geologists and geophysicists. So it's not found with machines or with maps or with some great new technology, even though many technologies have been developed over the years. It all comes from the mind of men and women throughout history, since the discovery of oil and gas for the first time, who studied the earth and the different movements of the sediments and the earth plates, and looked for areas that showed or gave them a sense of where the oil and gas would be. So it comes from the mind of men and women, and it comes from the minds of the men and women in today's oil and gas industry. So, who are these people? So, what is a geologist or a petroleum geologist? So, a petroleum geologist is an earth scientist, somebody who has studied the earth and the deposition of the earth and the movement of the various strata and the plates. And then they have focused in particularly on where oil and gas deposits would form in various strata and various depths throughout the earth, from the earth's surface, say, down to, say, 15, 20,000 feet. So, and oil and natural gas tends to congregate in areas beneath the earth's surface where you have faulting and deposition and structures. So a petroleum geologist is a earth scientist who essentially has studied the earth and has particularly focused on where oil and gas is formed and where it has migrated to. And the petroleum geophysicist is one who studies sound waves as they travel through the earth. And they interpret those sound waves to get a hint and a clue of where that oil and gas might be. You can interpret, or they can interpret, those sound waves in combination with the geologic maps to see if they can see a hint of, or an expression of, an oil or gas signature in that sound wave. And all of the great oil and gas deposits throughout the United States and throughout the world have been found by these geoscientists, that we call them. And often you will find them in teams. Often you will find a great geologist, petroleum geologist, with a great petroleum geophysicist. And these are great oil finding teams. And throughout history, as I said, oil and gas has been found by these professionals. In the early days, there was no technology, there was no wells to really correlate, and it was really wildcatting. People would walk around and look in areas like Texas and Pennsylvania and look for either oil seeps coming out of the ground, and then they would go and drill a hole in the ground to see if they could find it. Or say in Texas, like back in 1901, when they found the great Spindletop field, the greatest gusher of all time, there, he wasn't even a geologist, but he was a fellow who believed that underneath a mound on the surface of the earth laid a great oil field, and he was correct. And over the years, the science has progressed, but it's been these petroleum geologists and then the petroleum geophysicists who have often together worked and found these great deposits throughout the United States. And it wasn't until recently that, as I have discussed, that the advent of unconventional drilling, where the oil and gas industry turned away from conventional oil and gas and started drilling into these unconventional reservoirs that tend to be these regional formations that are made up of shales or tight rocks that hold a lot of gas and oil in them. And until recently, when the industry figured out how to break that apart with hydraulic fracturing, those formations wouldn't produce. So today, most of the industry has been focused on that. So it's become much more of an engineering play, where these formations will run for miles or hundreds of miles. And so it's really engineers that are the ones that have taken over the industry. It's become more of an engineering play, where the engineers are basically just focused on where to drill those holes and how to engineer those horizontal wells and the hydraulic fracturing to get the oil and gas to move into the wellbore. But again, predominantly the biggest oil fields in the United States throughout the years, and a majority of the oil and gas coming out of the ground today, better than 50%, even though we hear a lot about hydraulic fracturing and fracking and horizontal wells, a majority comes from conventional oil and gas reservoirs. And there is a resurgence today, as I have discussed. More and more companies are adding in conventional vertical wells because they cost less and they get a better return on their capital. The capital can come back quicker, and so with budgets being tighter and oil prices being lower, companies are getting more and more focused on rates of return on their capital and being much more budget minded. So they're blending in these conventional vertical wells. But the challenge is these great oil finders, these oil finding teams, the geologists and the geophysicists, most of these folks have 30, 40, 50, even sometimes 60 years of experience under their belt. Many of these men and women went to school back in the 50s and 60s and learned their trade. And they learned that very intricate trade of combining the mapping, the geological mapping and the geological deposition and the movement of the earth to be able to, with creativity, get a picture in their mind of where those oil traps are. Petroleum geology is a very creative, there's a very creative element to it. Many of those folks they've aged, like me. You know, most of them have gray hair. And when we, talk to each other, we often note we have a lot of gray hair. So there's a lot of gray hair in this industry, which means a lot of these professionals are getting older and they are starting to retire. And there's still many great oil finders in the industry, and I've had the great pleasure of working with many of them, and I know many of them. But a lot of them, because of the advent of unconventional oil and gas, and the industry went more towards engineering and less towards the geology and the conventional petroleum geology, they're starting to, get, I don't want to say frustrated, but they haven't been used as much anymore. And the industry sort of has said, that's okay, we don't need so much geology, we need more engineering. But with this resurgence of conventional oil and gas, this resurgence is going to be on the backs of these great oil finders. And there, like I said, there's many that remain, and there's many that are ready to put their trade back to good use. And they have that oil and gas in mind still. But that population is getting older. And but I like to say not older, more seasoned. And so one of the big challenges facing our industry today going forward as we move back towards conventional oil and gas is this population of these great oil finders. And they're out there. But as time goes on, more and more of them, they're getting older and starting to retire. And so, but these are the folks that are responsible for the great oil finds, and they will continue to be responsible for the next wave, the next great oil finds. And they've already found it. They already know where to go back, because when the industry moved away more into unconventional hydraulic fracturing, horizontal drilling, these guys didn't stop mapping and sit on their hands, these men and women. They kept honing their craft, and they've just been waiting and been hoping that the industry would come back. But this resurgence will be on the backs of these men and women, and that is where this great revolution is going to emanate from. And you will start to see some of these folks coming back into the industry, but they are a precious resource. They have the knowledge. And today, a lot of the industry, because it is focused on unconventional resources, the younger professionals coming into the industry haven't studied this great craft of being able to interpret what is underneath our feet in these structures, how to interpret the earth. And that is a very precious commodity. And so, for all of you watching who are oil and gas finders, some of the gray hairs out there, I'm talking to you. You're greatly appreciated. I've had the great pleasure of learning so much from you. And the industry has benefited. America has benefited. Again, most of our great oil fields and most of our production still comes out of the ground from your great finds. And your work is needed. And so I'm talking to you all, and I'm also talking to everybody who maybe doesn't know how oil and gas is found. It's found in the minds and the hard work of these men and women that still know conventional oil and gas exploration and production. And I will continue to talk about them as I go along. And it's not just the petroleum geologists and geophysicists. Yes, there is engineers involved, drilling engineers, production engineers, and I will touch on that in upcoming videos. So stay tuned. I hope that you got a little something out of this today, and I will be back again. And I appreciate everybody tuning in to learn a little bit about oil and gas and this new paradigm, the paradigm shift back to conventional oil and gas. Share with your friends, invite people to join in this shift, help me to build this community, help us build this community, and continue to help America keep growing and becoming more energy independent. So I'm Greg Davis. Thanks for coming, and we'll talk to you next time.